Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. And as is the habit, as soon as we go live, Chewy's camera has to crap out because that's the rules we run by here in BHN. How you all doing tonight? Doing well? Reminding you as well that we are off next week. Well, actually, we don't know if we're off next week. I'm off next week, and we are offering you a chance tonight again to talk to or to tell us if there's any clips or highlights from the past 7 months that you might want to hear. Then you are more than welcome to share them. Some of the ones that we've been talking about so far, for those of you who have been with us for a wee while, you might recognize some of these. Hori's pledge has been mentioned. The glory of our conversation has been mentioned. Mr. Luxon and his consequences conversation, the Fire and Fury episode, Chester Burrows, anything with Robert Patman, David Seymour being told that he's why he's racist or why he's seen as racist has been mentioned. And yeah, if you have any other ones that you think might be interesting to relook at, then we'd be happy to hear from you. We've got about 350 clips on the internet from this 7 months, of which about 200 of those clips are clips. You know what I'm saying? So 200 of those clips are the sort of 7 to 20 minute conversations we've been having. Yes, you all know how Chewy is often running. There's one there, Chewy running amok once again. Yeah, I know. We needed to figure out what happened with she had last night. I hear the pop. When we hear the pop, we see the chew. We hear the pop.
I'm here.
And we see the chew.
Oh dear God.
You're right.
That was high drama.
What happened?
Just bringing up all my research tabs and 132 tabs about the Ukraine war and how to buy a craft brewery crashed my computer.
We are not talking about Ukraine tonight, unless you'd like to talk about it.
No, I've been talking about Ukraine at the pub for about 2.5 hours.
God,
so probably
really?
not.
One of the things we're going to talk about is the platform tonight. And one of the reasons we're going to talk about the platform is there's an incredibly well-written, well-researched piece on a Substack talking about the funders of the platform. And through reading that research and drawing some conclusions from that research, I think I've come, and I've already told you this, Chewy, you can tell me if I'm drawing too long a bow, but I think I've already come to a conclusion that as much as Mr. Plunket rallies against government money, if it wasn't for a lot of government money, the platform would not be running today. Now, that's twofold. You could argue that Mr. Plunket, and I've said this before, and I'm actually going to play a clip from a conversation I had with Mr. Plunket, that no one would know who he was if it wasn't for public money. That's the first part of it, because Morning Report on RNZ and Fair Go on TVNZ were the two places that gave him his highest profile. That being aside, if it wasn't for money given from the government, there would not be a vast amount of money in the Plunket's bank balance. So if it wasn't for public money, the platform wouldn't be running. So no matter how much Mr. Plunket rallies against being given money from the government, they are operating because of, in some instance, on some level, money from the government. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight, Chewy.
I'm straight out of the gates there. I'm having real trouble believing this, man, because are you saying that somebody on the right who stands with great integrity for libertarianism, free speech, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, not beholden to the government, has in fact had his fucking hand out the whole time?
Well, I know the response is going to be that he personally never received funding from the government for the platform.
Oh, I see.
But equally, Chewy, if I steal the DVD player and you purchase it from me, you are still involved with the crime of stealing the DVD.
But
So if
surely,
the public money hasn't been given into your hand, but it's ended up coming into your bank account, I will say again, if it wasn't for public money, and a lot of it, the platform would not be running and it would not be functioning as it is today. There are going to be some people who challenge my logical conclusion, and I know that, but I think the example of receiving stolen merchandise, you receive stolen merchandise, you are still involved legally with the crime of the theft. If
I
you
am
don't
shook.
if you don't have your hand out and have the government put that money in there, but somehow vast amounts of money have come through a different source, public money, and ended up in your bank account, how's that any different? So
It was just resting. The money was just resting in my accounts.
Yeah,
We'll
have a look at that. We'll have a look at that. Also tonight, there's a couple of little stories going on. Have you heard the one about the the Hep C? Advertising Standards Authority have had complaints about the Hep C advert. Stick it to Hep C. Have you seen this? That's called Stick It to Hep C. In fact, I haven't brought the advert up. Maybe you could Google on YouTube, bring up the Stick It to Hep C. We don't need it yet, but because I don't have it, you can grab it. There's an advert that's on telly and it's on billboards and stuff, and it's people doing this, going Stick It to Hep C. The reason they're doing it is because that's where you get the little prick on your finger to give the blood to check for Hep C. That's had complaints, more than a dozen of them, to the Advertising Standards Authority.
Dozens of us.
We'll have some results about that shortly. Also, we have got Mr. Trump, and just a very quick story on Mr. Trump about how he is no longer the target of fundraising. You'll be surprised when we hear that Mr. Trump, who is actively begging for money most days, is finally not receiving money from the suckers that have been following him for 4, 5, or 6 years. And the last thing is we've talked a lot actually, about Izzy Cook this week and about her interactions with that mean girl on Newstalk ZB. And I say mean girl as in mean girls. But I managed to catch up with Mia Sutherland this morning. Mia Sutherland is also someone who was an organizer for the school strike for climate a few years ago, and someone who's a little bit older now, a little bit wiser, actually can share some interesting insights into what happens to people in Izzy's position. And it's fascinating to hear about the playing the man, and I'm using that man paraphrase, the man, not the ball situation that's always been going on. The things we've been talking about recently to do with how much of this is men attacking teenage girls.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelmingly, and even I've seen in my comments from putting those videos up, the video we did on the actual call, I wouldn't say 100%, but certainly probably 90% men. And the other thing that people seem to be missing from this whole conversation that we've been having is people are saying, nah, this is the overriding vibe. No, well, of course she had the right to call her on a hypocrisy. If you listen to any of our commentary this week, at no point did we say she shouldn't have said, hey, what about this irony? The whole time we've talked about it, it's been the manner in which she did it, which is in clear breach of numerous broadcasting standards. Yeah. So actually, I think we've actually said a couple of times, I think it's fair that she said, hey, Izzy, how do you square this circle about you flying to Fiji? We've actually publicly said that. We've said it amongst our analysis and our looking at the issue. But the people that are responding, you wouldn't trust to sit the right way on a toilet. So you don't have to take their thoughts. And I have to tell you, there was this conversation around how that people were called a river of filth and how it was bad. Some of the comments that I've seen, river of filth actually fits quite well, perfectly for many of them. I personally, nothing to do with me. I feel fine. I don't feel attacked or anything like that. But you can just see the comments being aimed at a 16-year-old kid. You can see these comments that are so often from people who have profiles that then go back to talking about family values. Family values, God, my Christianity, family values. Look at that stupid bitch. You know, there's a strange juxtaposition there. And also because of the silly accent, the number of people that have been talking about this issue who aren't even in New Zealand, like who are there's all over the world. This has become.
Oh, it's the troll army.
I actually
troll army.
I saw a story on popped up on my feed today from Sky News in Australia. Sky News in Australia covering it off. So it's now going on. And so now, because of that conversation from Heather du Plessis-Allan, Izzy Cook, 16-year-old girl from Wellington, is getting hate spammed from around the globe. So if anyone can still say it was an appropriate way for Heather du Plessis-Allan to act now, you need your head read. And it's ludicrous. And I'll say it again. No one in this show, I think, has suggested it's not fair to go to a 16-year-old dude. That, you know, there's a hypocrisy there. No one's suggesting you can't do that. What we're suggesting is you don't turn into a mean girl. No, what we're suggesting is you don't turn into a bully. What we're suggesting is this does not become the sum total of your conversation.
You went to Fiji. Are you serious? Are you serious, Izzy?
I didn't have to.
We'll talk to you.
Cross that cuts right through me.
Yep. So that's what we're suggesting. And if you don't get that, then you're beyond help. Like if you don't, even if you disagree, if you don't get that what we're saying is speaking to a 16-year-old like that is highly inappropriate, and in that instance was significant bullying. If you don't get that, then you're a lost cause. And I'd be happy to consider you a part of that river of filth. Doesn't bother me in the slightest saying that. Right. So let's have a look at a story that was put out by a TikToker and a social media star, Brown Scouse. Now, you may know of Brown Scouse.
Yeah.
He is a Scouse. I think that's Liverpudlian. And my understanding of his story, and I don't want to get into it in its entirety, is that he sort of discovered his roots. If you want to look up Brown Scouse on TikTok, mate, maybe you can bring up a video or two to show people.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah. So he found out his roots were from New Zealand. He found out he had Maori blood in him. And I think quite later on in life, he didn't have any clue until he found out. And as a part of wanting to find out more about his story, his life, his whakapapa, I guess you'd say, if you're being accurate, he came to New Zealand to discover what his Māori bloodline was all about and what the story was all about. He started talking to TikTok. He started doing it on TikTok, and he's blowing up. He's massive on TikTok. And so he did quite a lot of explaining what he was learning about, and then, you know, disseminating that to the public. I think now it's turned into more about an education thing and pointing out things. He rallies against places that, you know, paint stereotypes of Māori characters and figures and that sort of thing. But he also does a Substack, and I didn't know about his Substack until this week because he's written a very, very interesting piece. Did you find him on TikTok there?
I found an RNZ story, and there's some stuff on.
Why don't we just show a little video of him first of all? If there's a video on that, why don't we just show a little video just to show people what we're talking about? You have to bring your screen up.
Yeah. Just working on that.
A professional would have had this organized, but I haven't because I'm not a
professional. And a professional wouldn't have been drinking since 5.
Yeah.
Which is me. Oh, wow. I'm just looking at his TikTok for the first time. So to bring people up to speed, this guy,
bring it up on the screen. Bring it up on the screen. Talk us through it while you're seeing it. Do you remember how to do that?
Yes, I can remember. Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, Boomer.
Where is he? If you're going to say okay, Boomer, I'm definitely going to have to say I don't use TikTok very often.
So this is Brown Scouse.
So this is the guy Brown Scouse. Now, my understanding of this guy was when he blew up, born and raised in Liverpool, and basically, I think his mum's Pakistani or Indian or something like that. So he always put down a skin color to that, but it came out in much later life that his dad was a member of Herbs, and it was it was never really mentioned in the family. So at the age of, in his 20s, he found out that that was his background, that he's actually half Māori.
Pick one that's
so-
about three lines up. So you're giving him a few days to get into it, a few weeks to get into it, and just show people what the kind of thing he was doing and where he blew up and where we found out about him.
Well, I don't know. Let's go with this one.
Completely normal
All right.
if you're brought up in New Zealand, what can lead to terribly embarrassing situations if you're not. Part 1. So as I said in my previous videos, when I first moved to New Zealand, I worked at Waiparera, which is a Māori organisation in West Auckland. This was the first time I immersed myself in Māoritanga on a day-to-day basis. And it was my first experience regularly hearing people converse in te reo Māori. So in my first week, I was still getting used to the office life, just doing basic admin things like getting my name badge and learning the kaupapa of the organisation. And one day, I needed to log into my computer, but I hadn't received my login, so I asked one of my co-workers what I should do. He smiled and told me that the queer upstairs would be able to help me out. The queer upstairs? I can't lie.
I just got that.
I was taken aback by this comment. Now, I was pretty new here still, so I didn't get the general consensus on homophobia. Growing up in a very
All right.
working class area,
That's enough.
I heard every
We've
slur
had
under
enough
the
of-
sun.
So he's
Okay,
saying
so-
Kuia.
Yeah.
Kuia
So
upstairs.
long story short, this is a guy discovering his roots, a country that he'd never had any links to, and that sort of thing. It's an amazing story, and I found an article on Radio New Zealand really easily that's well worth a read. What I haven't realized until you just brought it up is that he's massively political.
Yeah, he is
And I
now.
love it. It's so good. His TikTok's so good. And then you've seen this article that's doing the rounds because you let me know last night that it's amazing. I've been avoiding it all day because I just want to react to it tonight.
All right. Well, we're not going to go. Well, the thing about what we're going to do with the article now is we're going to go through parts of it because we're relating it specifically to the platform and the funding for the platform. There's lots of other things in there about the Wright family. So it's probably time for us to bring it up. The Wright family are the backers and the funders of the platform. And the article on Brown Scouse, it's just brownscouse.substack.com. It's actually in the description of the YouTube video as well. I've got a link directly that you can have a look at it. And the article is headed up, The Wrights Are Wrong. We're not going to go through all of the bits in the article where he's done his research and he's pulling it out. I mean, like, you should go and read it. And that is that because it's so we don't want to like just give out all the information. You should go and read it. But where we want to talk to it, where I want to talk to it as well, is about the funding, because I guess you get which direction I'm going to go when I talk about government money. So the platform has received, now I'm going to say allegedly, I don't know if it's been publicly confirmed, but everyone says $3 million.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's been confirmed by the platform. It gets said in this article. I've heard everyone else say it, $3 million. Now, the $3 million that they've received has come from this family. Where did they get their money from? That's what we're going to look into tonight as well, because where they get their money from ultimately is the money that's funding the platform, right? If I ran a dairy and all my income came from the dairy, and then I started supporting the local soccer team with my personal name on it, the money that would be supporting that soccer team would be coming from the dairy. So it would be the dairy business's money, even if I was giving to them in my own personal name. You with me? You with me? So let's have a look at this. I'm going to read some parts of it out. So Brown Scouse again, the Wrights are wrong. I actually tried to contact Brown Scouse to see if he wanted to come on, but we never quite connected. So we'll leave it as it is. Right. So since its inception, Sean Plunkett's The Platform has repeatedly pushed harmful, hateful misinformation to its audience. This week, he's gone even further, minimizing the events of the Christchurch mosque shooting. While all the attention is focused on Plunkett, it's worth noting that he wouldn't be in this position if it weren't for the $3 million backing from the Wright family, founders of Best Start Education, the largest ECE provider in the country. Earlier this week, Radio Relic Sean Plunket, I'm just quoting, Radio Relic Sean Plunket urged his viewership of pale, stale males to read the Christchurch Terrorist Manifesto, a document deemed illegal to possess by the Chief Censor of New Zealand, a document that led to the death of 51 innocent Muslims in 2018. Plunket claimed, was it 2018 or 2019? It was 2019. Either way, Plunket claimed that the shooter wasn't a terrorist. He was a, quote, nutter with a gun, similar to calling a 9/11 a few nutters with planes. Very good point, actually.
Yep.
I have other bits highlighted. Have I got a bit highlighted here? Normally I highlight my bits. Maybe I've actually forgotten to highlight the next part. Oh, hang on a sec. Let me just see if I can just remember what I was trying to see. Let's go to this one here. Oh, this is always good, isn't it? All my highlighted bits have all disappeared. So the article in itself is incredibly interesting. You should all go through and have a look at it, read it all the way through. It is very, very detailed. Oh man, that's such a disappointment. All the because you know how I normally do it, I highlight the bits and I'd highlighted a whole bunch of them and they all disappeared. Which means I'm not gonna stay here and just flick through them all bit by bit.
It's a failure of the system. It's
a failure of my system. Now, if I had $3 million backing, I'd have someone have printed this out and highlighted it for me. So okay, so let's get to this. I'm going to try and remember as we did, but maybe after I read a bit, I'll have a bit of a break and you can take over with the comment show and then I'll try and find the next bit. I apologize about that. So he talks about Plunket. He talks about what they're trying to do. He talks about, his contrarian comes across as attention-seeking. Plunket is a man desperate to stay in the limelight by any means necessary, seemingly ruling off the mantra, any publicity is good publicity. This is different. This is dangerous. He goes through, but he talks about Calvin out. He talks about the nutter with a gun, but he said, but then it has a new heading. But who's to blame? The truth is, Plunket has been in decline for years, and while his style of journalism still has an audience, we should not forget that after his acrimonious ending with MediaWorks, Plunket was a turtle without a shell. Angry old white men are a dime a dozen in New Zealand. Check the Facebook comments of any New Zealand Herald article, but without a soapbox to stand on, they are relatively innocuous. The finger should be pointed in the direction of the Wright family, the sole financial backers of the platform, who picked him up off the top shelf, dusted him off, and gave him a $3 million second chance. Right, Chewy, you can jump in here if you want while I look for the next bit.
Yeah, so when I think it was someone in the chat here weeks ago that put me on to these guys, and like if you do a little Google about the Wright family, they're into lots of wholesome stuff. They run a business that's basically child daycare. They're running a whole bunch of charities about the first couple of years of children's lives, car seats for kiddies, all sorts of good, wholesome stuff. And I just can't gel that with someone that's like, give it a whole whack of money to Sean Plunket to do what he's doing. And then the comments of, we just don't think there's enough right-wing voices.
Yeah, well, that does come up in this article a bit later on. We'll get to it, but here's a couple of more little bits from it. The NBR Rich List has made their fortune through various businesses and investments such as telecommunications, kiwi fruit orchards, manufacturing, crib retaining walls. They have a portfolio of more than 75 properties and run the biggest private ECE provider in the country. And the jewel in the crown of their empire, Best Start Education. So, what is Best Start Education? Best Start Education, formerly known as Kiddie Corp, which I think is actually a name you should be incredibly careful with. Yeah, Kiddie Corp. I mean, the Republicans in America would do something with that, I'm sure. Kiddie Corp has more than 260 facilities across Aotearoa, looking after 15,000 children every week and making them the largest such operation in the country. In 2015, Kiddie Corp controversially restructured and rebranded as Best Start Educare. This restructure means that $20 million in tax-free income is paid each year directly to the Wright Family Foundation. Best Start makes around $275 million in annual revenue. You ready for this bit? Nearly $200 million a year is from government funding. So of let's just say $300 million, $200 million of it comes in government funding. Now, I'm not saying that the platform is being funded by the Public Interest Journalism Fund. What I am saying, though, is if you have built your wealth off the back of $200 million a year from the government, and then you hand some of that wealth to a person running a whatever, then there's a very good chance to believe that a good portion of the wealth you have from the government is being given to that group. Now, I'm also not saying that Sean Plunket has actively taken money from the government and he's just not acknowledging it. What I'm saying is, if I owned a dairy and I made $100,000 a year, and then I decided to sponsor a local sports team and sponsor them for my own name, that money would still be coming from my dairy business. Therefore, the money in Sean Plunket's platform's bank account is in part there because their wealth is in part there because they have a huge amount of public money. So I'll come back to my original statement, which is, if it wasn't for a huge amount of public money, the platform would not be operating today.
At what point do you just nationalize them?
I don't know. Yeah.
Like, if that's their revenue, okay, it's their revenue, not their profit. But that's an enormous amount of revenue that's just straight for the government. Why doesn't the government just cut out the middleman and go, cool, we're doing kindies now, we're doing daycare?
Yeah.
Like, like early childhood is such a rort. Like, there's so much money that goes into it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one
The
thing that
education system, but it's not. It's heavily government funded, but it's delivering profits to people. It's fucking weird.
Yeah, well, the one thing that I will also say is that, and I agree with people who are critical of government funding when it comes to this, is that if you're applying for government funding, you typically add a zero. I mean, Chewy, you know of it. I don't know if I've spoken about it publicly here before. I'm not going to do it tonight in case I haven't. But there is a particular provider of a podcast at the moment that does 100 podcasts a year. 100 podcasts a year, yeah? Audio only, right? Audio only podcasts that get funded over $8,000 per podcast to make. So that's what they receive. For 100 podcasts, there is a particular news agency in New Zealand that's been funded $806,000 to produce those 30-minute audio podcasts. Yeah. Now, I know, Chewy, you know, anybody with a brain knows it doesn't cost $8,000 to produce a 30-minute audio podcast. So what that business is doing is it's putting in a massive amount of funding from NZ On Air. And then it's, in my opinion, I haven't named this, I guess I can just be blunt, siphoning off some of that money and using it in other areas of their business. They're paying for journalists. They're paying for people to write copy. They're paying for the studio to make the thing. But the other thing is, it's all been accredited to that audio podcast, but will be getting used in many other places. So I do agree that there is a waste of public money, but I don't agree that therefore public money equals bad journalism. So so what I'm saying about the childcare is $200 million doesn't surprise me because when people go for government contracts, they add a zero. And I don't think you can argue with at least the logical link that if you're built your fortune, a huge amount of your fortune, of huge amounts of public money, then if you're paying money out to support other things, that's because in part of public money. I mean, I welcome you, Chewy, to tell me that it is too big of a long bow to draw. But what do you think? I think it makes perfectly logical sense.
Oh no, there's definitely people in the comments going, I don't know, that's pretty tenuous. But I mean, does this not just sit wrong? That there's people like we went on about this with the wage subsidy and that sort of thing. The amount of businesses that were like, we hate labor and you've locked us down too hard. But also, while I'm waving one fist, I've also got my hand out. If I could have that wage subsidy, thanks, that'd be great.
Well, they did that actually. There was a notion
of fucking course they did.
Here, where it is, I went past it because it wasn't what I was going to talk about. There, right here. To make things worse, they claimed $26 million in COVID-19 wages in 2020, with profits of $46 million in the past 2 years.
So these guys are going to get it either way. They're going to stick out their hand for stuff just because it's there, and then if Labor goes and National comes out, they're going to stick their hand out for being a backer. You know, they're going to get their money either way.
Yeah, well,
But
that's what they've done. Look, let me put this one other way as well. Then, if people who are challenging my logic, if I owned a pub, right, and I sold beer, right, and that was my business model, I sold beer.
I'm with you.
And then I sponsored the local sports team. Then the reason I could sponsor them was because I sold alcohol. So alcohol sales would be a reason that I was able to sponsor that group. The way I earn my money, where my money comes from, is a reason that I can give money to other things. If the reason you're getting money is because massive government contracts, then public money is the reason you can give that out again. I'm happy for people to say they're not quite on the same page as me, but I think it's a perfectly clear connection. And I'll say it again. I'm not saying that the platform is getting money directly from the government. I'm saying because of government money, in part, the government is operating. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to chuck up a couple of comments at this point because a friend of the show, Neon, has got a few comments. He's not quite with us. So where's daycare is government funded, 20 hours a week for every kid, no matter where they go. That's just something that's there. Okay, and
Sure.
The other comment is they can't get more money; they get a fixed amount per kids.
Yeah, but I think Neon's missing the point. I'm not even talking about the point. I don't think I've said they shouldn't be getting $200 million. I'm saying they are getting $200 million, and because they're getting a huge amount of money, that's adding to the wealth of the owners, or now the charitable trust. They're able to then pass that money on. I don't think I've said they shouldn't be making $200 million. I've said they are making $200 million.
Like Best Start Educare is like they've gobbled up or set up so many early childhood centres right throughout the country because they know straight out of the gates they get 20 hours worth of funding out of the government, and people with kids in daycare automatically need so much more than 20 hours. So there's money to be made out of kids, which is fucking great. But yeah, to use a lot of the profit that they get out of that, and it must be profitable because they have a huge footprint in the industry.
Well, let's have a look at
to point that money at anti-government stuff, or at least anti-this government stuff. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Now we're just talking about where it's being pointed as well, Chewy, right? In an excellent article on Spinoff, Duncan Grieve interviews Wayne Wright. He explains his motives to Grieve, saying that that famous Jessica then Tova set him off because it's interesting that a couple of females, out of interest, it indicated to us an all too cozy relationship between the government and the media. This is obviously quite concerning to the Wright family because of his family's all too cozy relationship with the National Party. After all, Wayne Wright Sr. was one of the biggest donors to National in 2016, with 2 donations totaling $32,000. The Wright family support of the platform was due to the family feeling, quote, not very happy with the direction of the country, end quote, perhaps because the direction is away from their sphere of influence. They are a family that is quite used to getting their own way, and they don't like being told no. There is a bunch of stuff in there. If you
don't like the way that the country's going,
you change it.
Fucking vote.
Yeah.
You don't pour a bucket of money into agitators. Like, fucking hell.
Careful with that, because they might want to pour some money into it. Just picking. Anyway, then there is a bunch of information around some other businesses they've got. We're not going to go into that. You can read it if you want. Brown Scouse points out some things about Mothers Matters and talks about when they had a short film made about them. It was filled with all those tropes and stuff, and I think eventually got taken down. The short film was pulled from television after multiple complaints were made to the Advertising Standards Authority for its obvious harmful depictions of Māori and scenes of suicide. It goes on. I'm just going to be it goes on to say one thing about, I know we won't get to that. Yeah, look, that's pretty much it from the article. There was a bit right at the very end. Here it is here. So whether right or wrong, no pun intended, my opinion is that the Wright family have had a long-standing influence in this country that has allowed them to profit from some of our most vulnerable people. Wayne Wright Jr. said in his spin-off interview, we think the fourth estate should be truly independent. We should be separate from government. But the truth is the Wright family want the fourth estate to be separate from this government. And I think that's beautifully said. And I also think, and I want to play you a little clip now from a conversation I had with Sean Plunket. We think the fourth estate should be truly independent. How the fuck is the fourth estate truly independent when they've got strings attached from a business saying things like no swearing? This is not truly independent. Like, the platform was not truly independent because it's got, $3 million from business mummy and daddy putting in terms and conditions. So that's not independent. So what are they talking about? Let me play you a clip here where we were talking about business mummy and daddy. I was being, I didn't quite say it as bluntly as that because I was still feeling out what was going on with the situation. But here's something that Sean Plunket spoke directly about his funders when he was on my podcast a few months ago. Don't you see that? Can't you see the irony that some others can see? I see it a bit, that you're now rallying against state funding. And all I'm saying is I'm not, because remember what I did say was,
I'm rallying against state funding with strings attached, Pat.
But remember what I said was the main reason now I didn't say it in this, but the point is, I do say this, what is the point? What's the difference between state funding with strings attached and private business with strings attached? We've said this before. State funding with strings attached, you know what the strings are because the contracts and stuff are public. Private funding with strings attached, no one knows what the conditions are behind closed doors. I know which feels safer to me, at least. You are where you are as your skill set. That's what I said first.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And then I said, but your profile, there's no question. Your highest profile, well, there is a question, but I suggest that your most high profile, most well viewed and listened to product would have been thanks to taxpayer funding. So one of the reasons that
it doesn't mean I have to join the Communist Party, though.
No, not suggesting that. I mean, but why is it that you rally against taxpayer funding? Like, because you're not saying here with strings attached, but full stop. Just like what? So NZ on Air is evil. So if we got money from NZ on Air to do our,
if the media were good at doing their job, as the fourth estate, they wouldn't need a government subsidy to make money.
Well, but hang on.
Well, that's tenuous.
You guys have got multi-millionaire backers. You haven't gone out into the marketplace and just got sponsorship.
My business partners, and my prime investors are private citizens.
Yeah, but he just said if the media was good at business, they wouldn't need a lump sum of money from the government. But he's had a lump sum of money from the Wrights. So doesn't that mean he's not good at business? Because he's basically done exactly the same thing, just from a different source. So what he's saying is if the media are good at what they do, then they wouldn't need to get funded by a big singular group as he's being funded by a big singular group. That's not a commercially
I do not have a bottomless
operation.
pit of money. In fact, I have very strict financial controls and expectations, and they sit on the board of directors with me. And this is going to be a sustainable business. And it's
just quietly as well, no media organization with public funding has a bottomless well of money either. They apply for it, they either get granted or not granted, then they apply for it again, they either get granted or not granted. There's no bottomless pit of money for any media agency from public funding either, in case people are unaware of that.
It's going to be a business that's going to have to wash its face, pay back its investors, and move to profitability relatively quickly.
But can you not
That's
see,
the thing that would keep me up at night if I wasn't sleeping so well.
But can you not see that there is at least some kind of, you may not see it as clearly, a parallel between taking a chunk of money from a family trust out of Tauranga or whatever the details
it's their business. Their charitable trust is completely separated from.
Okay, fair enough. I don't need to get into their details, so we won't worry about that. But just say taking a chunk of money to fund something for 2 years, which is what I think you said on RNZ from this area. And taking a chunk of money from this year, I mean, neither of those are a commercially viable entity yet. I mean, yours may grow into that, but you seem to rally against the one from the taxpayer, but be okay with taking it from the private.
Yeah, because the one from the taxpayer, the one from the taxpayer comes with strings attached.
Does it?
And it does not encourage the media business to truly do its job independent of government.
But you're allowed to do your job not being independent of business. Or not to be independent of individuals' perspective, like of a singular person and what their particular. Look, I think we can leave it there. We do get into a point next, and we've talked about this before, where we find out that he does have strings attached, and one of the strings attached is that there's no swearing on the platform. And that might seem like a very small thing to a lot of people, but it's a string. It means that there is a morality police not allowing the platform to be maybe as independent as some would want it to be. From the free speech people who don't allow all sorts of speech on their platform. It's just, I think if I'm being generous, it's ironic. Anyone else would probably say it's hypocritical.
Yeah, absolutely. He mentioned the trust and how it's completely separate, right? I'm just going to throw up a comment that we got earlier tonight, which I think is quite pertinent for that, from Cyrus. The Wright family gave away their business to a charity. This charity was the Wright Family Foundation, which is also owned by them. Essentially, they gave the company to themselves.
The article talks about that, and it says the dividends given out to the Wright family from that charity are $20 million a year. So that's what the charity gives out to the trust as a dividend.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't move in these moneyed circles. But does that sound like a massive tax dodge?
Well, yeah, it's completely legal. They're allowed to do it. They've done everything above board and legally, but there are, I mean, lots of people would question it.
Can I buy a guillotine from Amazon? That's where my brain goes when we start talking about this stuff.
All right, listen. I'll stand by it. I'll stand by this open statement that says, if it wasn't for vast amounts of public money, the platform would not have had the funding that it's had. I think that's a fair equation. Just like if it wasn't for vast amounts of alcohol sales at my pub, the local sports team would not have had funding. I stand by that. And I stand by that because it feels a little bit like Plunket saying public money going into journalism, terrible. Public money going to childcare, awesome, because I can get a big payout out of those people who own that childcare. It just feels a bit gross. Plunket also did a tweet the other day, and we've talked about this, which we're all happy about, genuinely, about being in the public health sector when he had his heart attack, and how amazing the nurses were, and thanked the public health sector. So public money into the health system, good. Public money into journalism, bad. Public money into the police, good. Public money into journalism, bad, because it's not into his journalism. It's a little bit like that article said, this government. I wonder about, it's not about getting into his journalism. I wonder what would happen if, let's say, and I don't wish anyone's business failing on anyone, I genuinely don't, but let's say that the platform doesn't become commercially viable, and RNZ offers him a job. You reckon he's going to turn it down? Public money. You know, public money. Just wondering out loud.
I mean, when people talk about the Public Journalism Fund, right, they do understand that the media landscape has changed massively in the past 20 years.
Yep.
Like every format of the media that was reliant, like I mean, we go back to TV and it, radio and print always have been funded commercially, and there wasn't a lot of you know, if you wanted to advertise, it was in the paper, it was on the radio, right? TV came in, and a lot of that was government funded. You talk about, well, even radio, actually, we're talking about the NZBC at that point.
Yep. So
government owned. And then part of that massive divestment of what is the government involved in broadcasting? This should be commercially sustainable. And it was for a little while. And then the internet arrived and just shat the pants out of all of that. And so along with that, you lose so much. You lose local body reporting, court reporting. You don't have enough money to fund reporters to look at what is going on in the country. And this is the government saying, okay, we acknowledge that this is a problem. Here is a pot of money from the government to do public interest stories. And from everyone that I've spoken to that's in that space, say, that's it. You apply for it, you sort of say what you're doing. And after that, it's like the New Zealand On Air funding that they do for musicians and that sort of thing. You have to qualify for it.
Yep.
But no one's telling you, hey, New Zealand popular rock band, we've given you some New Zealand On Air funding. We've actually found that barbecue reggae is the more successful music. So we require that music single that you're releasing be barbecue reggae rather than the normal genre. It's just acknowledging that people are doing a job.
Yep.
I get that people want to find a conspiracy and they want to find some reason that government equals bad. Believe me, if the government is bad, I'm on the front lines with you. But in this case, they're just pointing at something that's just not a fucking issue.
And the other thing that people, and we talked about this when we had Paula Penfold in, to really explain how any of this public funding works, whether it's journalism, whether it's NZ On Air or whatever, because the concern is the government telling these people what to do. It's not how it works. It's the other way around. The media organization says, we want to do this. and this is our cost, and will you fund it? The NZ on Air says yes, and then the media organisation does it. There's actually, it's not the government telling the media agencies what to do. It's the media agencies telling the government, NZ on Air, what we want to do, and then they decide whether they're going to fund it or not. It's ludicrous. It's utterly ludicrous.
I'm just going to chuck up a comment here from Bradley, which I think is quite good. How do we feel about our media merging into one entity? Isn't that going to limit perspectives on stories?
I'm assuming he's specifically meaning TVNZ, RNZ.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah.
I don't have a huge problem with it. I mean, it works, and the BBC model seems to work perfectly fine. You know, and I BBC Radio, BBC TV. I don't know if it's going to limit perspectives. We could lose, you know, individual people, because if you've got a singular newsroom now, let's say in the major centres, rather than having two, you might be down some journalists, so it might lose man hours, man and women hours, man, women, and other hours. But I don't have a huge problem with it. I like the BBC model. I'd actually be perfectly happy to pay like a licensing fee every year if one of the channels could be advert free. It might bring me back to television. Like if TVNZ went advert free and TV2 remained sort of like a commercial station, I'd be okay with having
with that
50 bucks a year or something.
I think you've nailed my concern there, right? So it's a merger, right? So is it going to be dead down the middle, or is one side of the operation going to influence the other? Are we going to have a TV station that slides more towards the more wrong word, but I'd say highbrow aspects of Radio New Zealand, or are we going to have Radio New Zealand diluted by a semi-commercial TV show? You know, or are they going to maintain their whole their existing characters? That's my concern with it.
Yeah, and I guess there are already concerns coming out. So, for example, one of the concerns coming out, and we've been speaking of Plunket. My understanding is one of the reasons he ended up leaving Morning Report. I don't know if it's the only reason, but my understanding is that he wanted to do some writing for another outlet, like he wanted to do some other work, and they wouldn't allow him to. And that was one of the reasons he moved on. At the moment, TVNZ talent is allowed to do things like be in advertising campaigns, and they're allowed to get paid to do their social influencing, that kind of stuff. RNZ people are not. So there are also things to work out, which you're talking about, where will they come more highbrow or not, or will they dumb it down? Where will they go with that kind of thing? So there are still definitely issues to work out without question.
I just want, say specifically TV, to tell more New Zealand stories.
Yep.
To spend less money on importing fucking terrible trash from overseas, and going for lowest common denominator advertising showcases like, say, The Block, which is just the pits. It's a rolling ad for so many people, with as many ad breaks as you can get in there, with the lowest amount of you can get the whole thing paid for by the advertisers. You spend no money, but it's terrible TV. Well,
but I mean, I don't have a problem with that, because people watch that stuff, but that is the commercial wing. So that's TV2. TVNZ can be a better, like TVNZ 7 they used to have was a nice idea, but it was never done well enough, because it was sort of TV1, but its poor little cousin. Whereas if TV1 became a proper TV1, and that was still where the main news was, and that was still where breakfast was, and then it had some other programs through the day, and then it also had the representation and no adverts, that'd be great. And then TV2 can play Shortland Street and Friends replays and all that kind of stuff that can stay on TV2. Best of both worlds.
I tell you what I want. I want an up-to-date, high production value remake of Under the Mountain.
That has been done, eh? Oliver Driver was in it.
Yeah, but I mean, do it again.
So you want to see a third version?
Just do it again. I can't make myself more clear.
Wow,
fucking love that TV show. That was great, and the book's awesome, and more.
That scared me when I was a kid. That scared me
the shit out of me.
Yeah. And then Oliver
what was it? The Wilberforces living under all the volcanoes in Auckland?
No, I was working
slug people.
I was working with Oliver because he was doing a shifter on Sunday nights at ZB, so it was interesting to watch all of that. So yeah, no, I think it was I mean, yeah. If you gave it to someone like Peter Jackson, I wonder what it would look like. Be pretty cool, eh?
He's too busy funding a mayoral candidate in Wellington. Sorry.
Hey, let's unless there's anything else you desperately want to put out there, I do. There's 2 short stories, and then I've still got a quite a long interview to come in. I don't want to be here till 11:30, but I think I'm probably going to be. So, which is all right. This is our last one for a week, so I don't mind hanging around for a bit longer. So let's move on from that one, and let's have a look at this Advertising Standards Authority situation with the Stick It to Hep C advertising campaign.
One little finger causing a stir.
Hep C, we have one thing to say. Stick it.
Clearly, it wasn't intended to offend. It was a friendly finger.
There's an easy fingerprint test.
Yeah, I'm sorry if anyone did, but the message and what we've achieved with the ad is more important.
The Stick It to Hep C campaign was launched by Minister Aisha Verrall 2 months ago. The aim to curb the country's high death rate from the disease by encouraging people to get a simple finger prick test.
So go on, get tested and stick it to Hep C.
But the ads pulling the middle finger have now been pulled themselves.
We're modifying the ad and using different images.
The Advertising Standards Authority received 19 complaints about the ads on TV and on billboards, ranging from people calling them disgusting and vulgar to immoral and irresponsible. The ASA agreed.
Yeah, disappointed, surprised. I thought it was a really good ad. I thought it was punchy, to the point, really clear. Really, really important message.
But is it really that offensive?
It's pretty harmless, doesn't do anything. It's just a finger.
I said to my husband, "Ooh, that's quite cheeky."
It's not something I want my children to see, that's for sure.
Well, I certainly don't take offence to it. Oh, I think it's cool, actually. No, it is.
And while the minister didn't find it offensive either,
We have to respect the ASA's ruling, but we'll continue to tell New Zealanders to stick it to Hep C.
this time though replacing the middle finger with the more modest thumbs up. Leighton Hakel, News Hub.
Thoughts,
they
Chewie?
knew that was coming. That was definitely the case of like, okay, so we're going to film the first version of the ad. It'll be up for a week, and then we're also going to film the other one.
I have to say it worked though, because I do remember seeing that for the first time. Because occasionally I do watch, is it the Living Channel? It's about the only TV station I actually watch, or maybe it was on a All Blacks game or something. And all I could, there was all this is all the first 30 seconds of the advert, just this. I was like, what the fuck is this? Just this all the way through, this. But I tell you where I think they missed out. They could have done an in-between. Like if they had gone like that on the side.
yeah, it's not pointed at you.
But then it would have been like you could have easily done that and then just, sort of done this. So rather than that, and they would have got away with it and it would have had the same sort of reference. And I thought about that today, like this is just that. Oh, sorry, look, people can you see what I'm trying to?
Oh, I'm offended.
All right.
I just want to, whenever someone goes, I don't want my kids to see it. If your kids interact with other kids, they already know. They might not do it around you, but they bloody know.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think that is I get it, I guess, from having worked in the sort of mainstream world for a while, you get that there's a complaint. I mean, I'm someone who made a complaint this week for the first time in my life, and there might be 3 of us who have complained. So I guess I'd be hypocritical to say, oh, look at all those pansies complaining. And yeah, maybe when it comes to what the advertising standards should be. Advertising is the Broadcasting Standards Authority. I know better than the Advertising Standards, and Broadcasting Standards Authority talk a bit about what's the expectation of the audience. So if you heard the word "fuck" on the rock, it would be handled very differently by the Broadcasting Standards Authority because of what the audience was and what they expected than if you heard it on ZB or on,
I remember that from my ad writing days. There was stuff that I could get away with in an ad on the Rock or the Edge that would never fly on More FM or that sort of thing.
Yeah. So so with that, I don't know. It's I can understand how it got upheld. Personally, I didn't have a huge issue with it, but as I just said, after being someone who's just made their first complaint ever to my former colleagues listing the breaches of the BSA, I guess I can't really hate on people for finding that to be the thing that tipped them over the edge. I mean, my thing was someone bullying a 16-year-old viciously on the radio making demeaning her in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and then a part of the onflow from that becoming a worldwide issue where this teenager continued to get bullied. Theirs was they didn't like this. So I guess, you know, we have a bob each way. Yeah, I know. I know it's possible. I know it's possible. Do you want to play us the advert? Should we play it?
I haven't got the advert, but I did have. Obviously, I went to the website and saw immediately that they've changed it. I love that the little pinprick is obviously photoshopped, and that you wouldn't have had this website. Or there's the original logo. But they must have had this. They must have filmed a safety one. There's no way that they got all of these people back to redo it. They just went, we're going to push the boat out on this one, and we'll see. And if we get 19 complaints, then we're just going to roll with the backup.
You look after yourself for a second. I'm just sorting out an issue in the house for a bit. I'll be back to you in 30 seconds.
Uh-oh. What's going on? Someone coming in, murderer. Just the idea of a safety ad is I love it, especially from a government program. Is like, we're going to take the piss here, and if it goes wrong, we're just going to roll it back.
I was wondering if that had been Photoshop. It doesn't look like it. It looks like a genuine image.
Oh yeah, but the blood prick on his thumb is definitely photoshopped.
Yeah, no, look, I agree with Rob as well. I agree with that, because when I saw it for the first time, I was like, how much did we watch advertising? Like never. And I watched it all the way through, and
now we're talking about it. Yeah, so
all
it's
right.
working.
Something else to talk about is to talk about Mr. Trump. Yeah.
Is he in jail?
Trump, he's not in jail, but he has become a bit of a laughing stock. You ready for the headline? Trump's super PAC raised just $40, not 40,000, not 40 million, just $40 in August, despite offering supporters branded trinkets. Former President Donald Trump's super PAC raised only $40 in the month of August, and a sign that his name doesn't have the same fundraising pull it once did. Along with the low August numbers, the Make America Great Again super PAC only raised but listen to the numbers, $350,000 in July, nothing in June, and then $40 in August. By comparison, in the final fundraising quarter last year, the super PAC raised $4 to $5 million. So the shine appears to be coming off Mr. Trump, finally. And there are many videos of him today on the internet going around talking about, we have to get funding, we need this, we have a deadline coming up, which is all horseshit. There's no deadlines coming up. What he's actually saying is, I need money. I don't think I'm going to be able to get away with not paying my lawyers this time. I think I might have to pay my lawyers, so I need you guys to give me some money. But there are people putting money elsewhere. Ron DeSantis is probably getting more funding, and it's not looking good for investment in Trump Inc. from the grassroots is not there like it once was.
Oh, well, that's got to be something, because the whole idea of what he's doing is for money. I don't think that's up for debate at all. I honestly feel that his whole run at the presidency was about money, and he was almost surprised to have won it and then had no idea what to do apart from continue to grift like a motherfucker and make as much money.
Yeah, I think the grift is the right. When I say the right thing, I mean the accurate thing. You know what I'm saying? It's a shocking situation. What's been going on with him, and it's pleasing to hear. Gosh, it is like I know we talk about Slender Man, and we talk about the Candy Man saying his name 3 times. You still would never count him out, but it looks at the moment like even supporters of Trump are kind of going, yeah, we're not so much a fan of Trump at the moment.
Have you seen American political fundraising emails?
Yes, I was subscribed to Trump for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, Eric Trump is reaching out to you to support his father, the president of the United States. If you've donated any money to them at all, they just do not let you go. And they're the most weirdly aggressively phrased
Yeah.
things I've ever seen. Like, it's like it would never fly here. And it's just so bizarre.
Well, it's also a different model. Although I do like, I know we've chatted with Neon a few times now. I do like Neon's. I hear this as a suggestion. That awkward moment when BHN has more dollars in super chats than Trump's campaign in August. Well, that sounds like a challenge. You know, can we do $40 by the end of the night?
The BHN
chat.
super PAC. If everybody could put their email address in the chat, I'll add you to an email chain.
Well, like I said last night, I'm off for a week. I've done 7 months of these shows every single night of the week for 7 months, and I'm off for a week, and I'm going to program some best ofs for the week. But Chewy over there and George are also going to keep an eye on the news, and they're going to have a chat with each other, and they may jump in for a night or two or none. But you know, the idea of the Patreons that are coming out in the next day or so, hopefully they'll all go on black when I get to the casino at Auckland and see if we can double our money for the following month. Something
if
like
you've
that.
seen the plot of Empire Records, it's like that. You are Liv Tyler.
All right. Hey, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because, you know, with the whole, there's a groundswell behind the Democrats. Well, that's actually an exaggeration. There's a swell behind the Democrats at the moment. It looks like they will keep the Senate. And at one stage, a couple of weeks ago, I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but their uptick, if their uptick had continued as it had for the previous 4 weeks, if they had that slow uptick had have continued by election time in November, they'd be neck and neck to keep Congress as well. I think it's unlikely they're going to keep Congress, but it was trending up enough that if that trend kept on going, they were going to keep the Senate. According to the polls, you know, and this is 538. They don't really do the polls. What they do is they give them a percentage. And I think that the Senate was around 60%, which means if the way they word it is if this was run 100 times, 60 times, the Democrats would win, 40 times the Republicans would win. So even if it is 60-40, it doesn't mean that the Democrats are going to win. But, you know, compared to what they thought was going to happen 6 months ago, ironically, thanks to Roe versus Wade, it looks like it could be a very interesting series of elections come November in the US, which I'm sure we will continue to carry off. Right. Chewy, I've got a pre-recorded conversation now with Mia Sutherland. Mia Sutherland is the former organizer of School for Climate Strike out of Christchurch. So she's been the organizer in Christchurch that Izzy Cook is in Wellington. And I was very keen to have a chat with her because as someone who is, you know, a little bit older now, she can kind of look back on and share her experiences of being an organizer. And it's interesting to hear from her how much abuse and stuff that she got. And you might not be surprised to hear, Chewy, but some of the stuff that she was getting, quite a lot of it had nothing to do with the content of her arguments, shall we say. Might surprise you, Chewy. Content of her arguments. What are you going to do? You going to hang around in the chat or are you going to shoot off?
Yeah, I'll still be in the chat.
All right. I've got a teenage issue to sort out here at home. But I will definitely be back before the end of the conversation. I've seen it. Do you know why I've seen it? Because I was in it. And I'll see you at the end of the chat. Feel free to keep putting comments up that are coming through during this conversation. And we'll wrap up at the end of the night. And remember, between now and the end of the night, if there's a clip that comes to mind from the first 7 months that you'd like to see repeated next week, put it in the chat. And if you see any, Chewy, star them. And we'll have a look at the end. And other than that, let us check out Mia Sutherland. I'm speaking to her live in the UK. She's actually in a hostel. And at one stage in the hostel conversation, she has to move her phone off the top of the microwave because someone else wants to cook their dinner, which is fantastic. Proper student traveling, you know what I'm saying? Here's Mia Sutherland. Well, joining us from the UK, live from the UK right now, is Mia Sutherland. Mia Sutherland is a former School Strike for Climate organizer, and Mia's been writing about her experience as that organizer, especially in relation to Izzy Cook, and can probably add some pearls to this conversation. Mia, good morning New Zealand time, good evening UK time.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, doing very well. What you doing in the UK?
I'm on a bit of an OE at the moment. I'm sure I won't get away with saying that I'm overseas.
Right. I didn't even think about that. I didn't
It's
put
not
two and two
lost
together.
on me at all.
Yeah.
It's not lost on me at all.
Because that means you don't care about the climate if you've been on a plane and flown to the UK.
Yeah, it's
have you?
unfortunate. All my hard work's undone. But you know, happens, I guess. You get disillusioned. No, so I'm on a bit of an OE at the moment. I'm working over here just on a bit of a break from my degree.
Yeah.
COVID kind of, am I allowed to swear?
You can say whatever you fucking want.
Okay, COVID kind of fucked up uni a wee bit for a lot of people. So over here now, having a great time. Still involved in climate stuff. It's really good. Definitely a lot harder over here. Obviously, the government fucking sucks. So it's really interesting getting that insight, and I can't wait to bring it back to New Zealand eventually. It's really cool.
Are you studying something that will move into the field of like, will it flow on from the organising and climate stuff, or is it completely unrelated what you're studying?
So I was doing law and geography. So
Okay.
that was kind of, that was going into sustainability law. One of my big passions is public transport, really, and urban planning. So that was kind of where I was going with that. I probably still will. I've deferred it. I can go back to it if I want to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, well, you've written a piece. You've written lots of pieces. You were a contributor to stuff for quite a while. My understanding is, and you wrote a piece in this after the situation with Izzy Cook and Heather du Plessis-Allan, which we've commented on several times this week here in Big Hairy News, and it is titled, for people who are listening to the podcast, as a former school strike for climate organizer, I'm all too familiar with ridicule. But this interview even surprised me. Before I ask you any kind of specifics about your perspective and your experience, what were your reactions to hearing that conversation with Heather du Plessis-Allan and Izzy Cook a week ago, actually?
Yeah, a week ago. So, yeah, as it says in that title, you know, I'm used to it. And at first I kind of wasn't surprised in a way. But the more I thought about it, the more I kind of thought, no, this is a broadcaster. This is someone who has a platform. This is someone who is using her platform and has a following. It's not just a random Facebook commenter. It's not just someone's, you know, granddad angry in the comments. This is like, this is like a person who kind of sets the precedent for how we can treat people in a way. Media and the people we see online, they do set a precedent for us. And so the more I thought about it, the more I was like, hold on, this actually just isn't right. And, you know, we've dealt with blows from bigger media people, you know, back in 2019, there were plenty of people who had something to say. But I just guess I'd never really, I think you described it quite well when you said it was very Mean Girls. It was very like, it was just kind of like, it just felt so just ridiculous. It just felt fake, and it just really, really struck a nerve with me because it picked up on something that really annoys me, which is the whole putting so much of an onus on people to change these big systems, which obviously we'll go into later. But I just thought, like, I haven't picked up the pen for a while, and I was just like, actually, like, no. And I think as well, I really wish that someone had kind of been there to kind of fight back for me as well when I was that age and doing the school strikes. I'm not saying, you know, I did anything for Izzy. I've never talked to her, or, you know, I have no idea if she even read that piece. But I just know that back in the day when I was doing that sort of thing, whenever someone commented something nice or said something or did something nice for me that was in response to what I was doing, it always meant a lot. So I was like, actually, you know what, like, fuck this, I'm gonna write about it.
No, look, I kind of feel the same. I mean, my interest, not my interest in this, but my sort of angle on this is I worked for ZB for over a decade, right? So there's a part of me which is like, I know how the system works. I know, I don't know Heather du Plessis-Allan at all. She came on board after I left, but I still know people there today. And I've had people there today who are still in that building today thank me for the complaint I made. So, you know, I didn't reach out and make a complaint officially, which is the first time I've ever done anything like that in my life, especially from someone who did work in radio to a radio company.
Yeah.
For anything like as a support thing. But there are people within the building today who have thanked me for making the complaint.
Yeah.
And then I've obviously had an influx of people from within the building today with all the goss and all the what they see is going on as truth with the new structures of what's happening in their building. And what did someone say to me? That it's lost its moral compass. That ZB's lost its moral compass. The people who are working there today, not like well, not people who have left it and are pissed off with it, or who are working for the opposition now, but people who are working there today are saying that. And so what you're saying about hearing support kind of echoes with me to the broadcaster side of it as well. I've got people coming to me going, thanks for doing that, even though it was nothing to do with them and it wasn't affecting them. But like I said the other night, I had kind of an online live counseling session, and I'm like, what I think I realized part of it for me was I love that medium of radio. I love it, and it feels like Heather du Plessis-Allan kind of took this medium that I love, screwed it up into a ball, shat on it, and then threw it out there. Kind of treated it, basically abused it. She's like a talkback radio abuser. So I hear what you're saying from another perspective. Not that I also didn't make some statements to sort of in support of Izzy, obviously as well. But I what you're saying echoes with me to the flow-on effect to other people around it. When you kind of, I think you probably made a stand. I made a complaint, but you can see how that helps community, and there's a byproduct of people around you that are grateful for that interaction that people have done with it. Which I'm sure she's obviously seen your article and knows of it, so I'm sure that they're grateful for you standing up and speaking out.
Yeah, I hope so. I do. Yeah, I do know that. Yeah, as I said, back when I was writing and getting all these comments and stuff, and never at the same level of publicity as this, but still in such a high quantity and consistency, so I do somewhat understand how.
Well, I think you're right, though. It also really does. It's about the person. Like the person who did this is a seasoned journalist, a professional, highly paid broadcaster. I mean, getting highly paid shouldn't make you good or bad, but is.
Still, it holds an accountability.
Yeah, a mother.
Yep.
She's a target of advertisers, so there are big companies that support that show with their advertising dollar to pay her. She'll be on in excess of $300,000 a year easily. I know what some of the other salaries are there, and all those things added together. And then what they did was took, and I don't want to say this in a way that kind of denigrates any work that a 16-year-old can do, but an idealistic kid who wants better for the planet, even if that idealistic kid has made some missteps along the way. Because I'm still of their belief it wasn't a problem Heather having a conversation with her about the flight to Fiji. I really am. It's about the how. Like, I've got kids who are idealistic, and I sometimes go, oh, come on, mate. What about this? This doesn't really sing with everything else. There's a way to do it without basically demeaning and degrading the person in front of hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, that's the thing. It was very uncalled for. And I think a lot of the feedback and criticism I got from the article, well, it wasn't criticism, it was bullying. But a lot of the feedback I got was that, you can't take any criticism. We can't critique anyone anymore. Like, you guys, like, you kids, if you can't be treated like adults, we're going to treat you like kids. Kind of this kind of rhetoric, which is really frustrating, first of all, because this kind of bullying cannot be called critique. It's just completely, I don't need to explain that. Like, any normal, sane person knows that you can't say you're stupid and say that's a critique. That's not a critique. That's just bullying. So the fact that du Plessis-Allan missed out on the opportunity to properly have a constructive critiquing conversation,
totally,
first of all, really frustrates me, because there's so much room for that in the climate space, and I'm constantly welcoming this constructive criticism and this building on collaboration of different ideas, because that's how a movement happens. That's how things happen. And of course, like, as a young person and as even people older than me, our opinions are never going to be the same forever. Like, I can say, I want climate action, I want this to happen, X, Y, Z. But something could change my mind on that, not on climate action.
That's
but
pretty consistent.
No, no,
in
but
terms of-
what could change? What could change amongst that is your ideas could become more and more fully fleshed out and nuanced
Exactly.
as you get older. Like I've been using the example this week. Can you, like a 16-year-old in 1981 on the streets for the Springbok tour?
Yeah, I saw
You know,
that. Yeah.
imagine if an advisor had gone, well, how are you going to stop cigarette? What are you going to do to the businesses in South Africa who now have to provide for twice the number of people? What have you not thought of these things through? Or like a 16-year-old on the streets in the 70s for the Vietnam War. Well, how are you going to stop the draft? How are we going to get these people? You know, like it's like on some level again, and I don't want to be dismissive to young people. They're trying on these ideas to see what fits, and they're trying how to communicate them, and they're going, I don't fucking know. I just want Nelson Mandela to be released from prison. You know, this is not okay. So
It's
then it's the nuance, and it's the that comes with age and experience from the start. And I feel like people who are going, and I would like to move into your experiences now. People who are going into the it's interesting the number of people. And I'm now getting comments on my posts about this week from all over the world. I find that to be really interesting. I'm getting comments on my posts, and I can't say it's all of them now, although I have said it in the past, that are probably 90+% male. And I'm getting comments from all over the world that are completely not what I've said, because what I've said, it's how she talked to her. It's not that she brought it up. And they're all saying, well, of course you can bring it up. So all of the comments I'm getting are about the viewed hypocrisy of the flights. They're not actually about what we were talking about, which is how she talked to her about it. So I'd love to know your experiences. In your article, it's a very short part of it, but you said, when I was dealing with something similar, Izzy Cook, and I actually still deal with it today. Can you expand on what you did deal with, even if give us some examples if you want, and how you still deal with it today, what you mean by that?
Yeah, so back in the day, there are a lot. I know Stuff doesn't do it anymore, but they used to post their articles, some of the opinion articles, to Facebook, which is obviously where all good opinions go to die. And everyone's, they're like, don't read the comments. Of course you're going to read the comments.
Yeah, of course.
You're 17. Of course you are. So I'd always read them. And they were always lovely ones, but they were always just pretty feral. And it was because you're challenging people's mindsets, and you're challenging what they deem to be their rights and the way they operate their lives and the way they're comfortable. Challenging people's comfort is always something that's going to rile them up.
Yeah.
And the way that people expressed that was always very interesting, especially when it was usually men, because men more often than not, the comments that men were making would be about my body. They'd be about my mental health. They'd be about my sexuality or my sex as a young girl. And they'd be about who I kind of was as a person. They wouldn't ever sort of come at an angle that was, like, cool article, but I don't really agree with you. Here's why. It was always just like, stupid, fat, ugly bitch, Nazi. And you'd kind of read that and go, okay.
Nazi.
Yeah, I got a couple of DMs that were calling me a Nazi, which were interesting. Which obviously just goes to show how nuts these people were. But as a 17-year-old, when you're getting bombarded with this stuff, it's pretty rough. So it was very much a lot of that. There was a lot of, especially when I wrote an article or an opinion piece about my concerns about having children at this time, or like looking into my future and kind of thinking about if children are an option given the climate crisis and what kind of world bringing a child into is like. So a lot of that brought up a lot of discussion about my sex life. It's pretty gross as a 17-year-old. A couple of comments about my pussy, which was not ideal. Quite a few comments, couple of messages like, well, no one's ever gonna find you attractive anyway, like whatever kind of thing.
Man.
Which is just all ridiculous. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. And luckily today, I don't really deal with the personal kind of comments that I got then. Definitely in response to this article, because it's less body focused, I guess someone, well, none of my articles were body focused. People made them body focused.
Sure.
But people were more hung up on my, intelligence this time around. But it is always a conversation around when you bring it up. People will say, they'll bring up one of the cards. It's usually flights, children, or vegetarianism. That's the three, apparently. And challenge you on it and say, like, oh, well, if you care about the climate so much, you can't have kids, you can't fly around, you can't eat meat. And it takes a lot to try and convince someone that they need to reconsider and look at the bigger picture of systemic change rather than putting it all on the individual. But I suppose in this sort of time, I am still dealing with the sort of backlash. I mean, you always will be. And at the end of my piece, I did say, like, I've always sort of stood by those words that I was told when I was about 16. That was, if no one's pushing against you, you're not pushing hard enough.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. I remember working for a radio station, one of my first jobs ever, and the boss there made it very clear that we always have a complaint line, and it was a similar sort of thing. He said, if you're not getting complaints, you're not pushing that line far enough. And when I read that again, because I guess my background in broadcasting, I remembered Uncle Larry saying that, and it was it's similar to it. And I think the other thing that I've observed, because I've had a look at some of the comments, and it's interesting how being male, probably being older, being white, being 6'4", although they can't tell that from me sitting down, I don't get the same kind of physical. I've had none. But then again, it's not even my opinion really. It's me putting out there that I think this opinion shouldn't be treated like that. But I've had a look at some of the stuff, and just because I've been interested as to who's been saying them, what a high percentage of these people making these comments derogatory about a 16-year-old girl on various profiles and stuff also profess things like family values. And I just think it's a really interesting dynamic that these people who identify as kind of family first, God, all these sorts of traditional conservative views on that, then also think it's okay to shit on a 16-year-old with absolute vengeance. And I don't know how to square that circle other than going, you know what, your opinion is now null and void. It's a black swan. If you're that far on that opinion, if there's that much disparity between your actions and what you say you are, then your opinion is actually null and void, because you can't have you can't have these diametrically opposed positions where you're okay for a 16-year-old to get bullied mercilessly and still claim to be kind of a person of family value. So I'm like, fine, you're off the list for needing to communicate with, because you're basically you can't have a rational conversation with this person. So not that I engage, but I was surprising that. Well, actually, what? To be honest, I wasn't surprised, because I know the political world, but I acknowledged and wanted to see that how many of them were like, let's be honest, right-wing conservative, gun-toting, family-friendly nuts.
That's the thing. It's just, and if it was pick your battles.
And if it was their 16-year-old who had been treated like that by, let's say, a quote-unquote left host, they would be uber Karening, saying this person should be cancelled and get off here and that kind of stuff. And the one challenge that I've had is like, well, if it was like a conservative kid doing that, would you do the same? And I was like, yeah, of course. Because it was about the response that this adult gave this child. And the only response I've got to that is people kind of going, oh, I don't believe you. But it's like, it's absolutely the truth. If it was the shoe was on the other foot, it's about how an adult treats a child, and I would absolutely have that same conversation. Time for the microwave. Hey, look, Mia, it's been fantastic to catch up with you there in your hostel. Are you in London at the moment? Is that where you actually
Sure am. Yeah, London.
And I guess because you're the one that's experienced in this world, is there anything you want to leave us with, any particular thought or think? I mean, you've been where Izzy is right now.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to leave us with before we sign off and say good morning, good evening to you?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is that there's going to be heaps of people listening, and if they've made it this far, good on you. Just people, the kind of people who are listening who might want to leave a nasty comment after this. And that I just challenge you to just do better, not even leaving a nasty comment. Like, actually come up with a proper argument. Come up with a proper argument. Do better. Constructively critique me and this movement. Don't just resort to lazy name calling, because that's, if you actually have an opinion on something, speak it. Don't be lazy. Don't be a little shit about it. Actually come bring your words, because it's just like, it's so disappointing. You know, sometimes I want a good wee debate with someone and talk about, I don't know, I wrote quite a few pieces and lots of them were quite controversial. I wrote a piece about genetic modification, which something I'm really passionate about. It's an unpopular opinion. And that was because I talked to people, I got constructive criticism, and I, did my research. So I challenge you to actually come up with something decent instead of just saying you're a stupid, annoying little girl who doesn't deserve to vote and has flown overseas.
I do love the phrase you just said about using your words. I love that. And the reason I love it is what I found with this group of people. If you act, because that's how you speak to a toddler. Come on, use your words. Don't have a tantrum. Use your words, and that it's accurate. And they hate it. One of the things I often do is I always go, "Oh, you're adorable. Look at you using your big boy words. You're well done." And they go off the handle. Do you know why? Because it demeans them. Yet they're now saying it's okay to demean a 16-year-old. And I guess when I do that, it's me pointing out the hypocrisy of all these adorable little darling right-wingers trying to put on their big boy pants and use their big boy words. So I love that you've just said use your words. So look, thanks for joining us. Former school strike for climate organizer Mia Sutherland from the UK. I really appreciate your time, mate. And sounds like something good's been cooked for dinner there. So thanks for joining us.
I assume so. Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's been good to chat.
And there we go. Chewy, I hadn't seen that. What do you think?
I think that was really good. Some really good points. I also liked the intervention of the microwave.
Yeah, that's funny. Hey? She was like, we started off and she was like, we can't use video because I'm in the hospital. I was like, dude, one of my co-hosts last night came back from a concert, I think slightly drunk. I'm 2 for 2. His partner came into the room blowing a kazoo and the dog was barking. I think that actually having stuff in the background of a hostel is okay. We can handle it. Hey, look, I want to say this as well. And when I say this, it's not, I thought it's because I'm going to be away for a week. I thought I should probably do this because as we all know, people are really only here for one fucking reason, aren't they?
Doggo.
I think that I really do believe that idea about use your big boy words. And I mean, I don't think I'm really into debating people. I don't know if I am or if I'm not, but I'm going to use the word take on. It sounds a bit aggressive. I don't know what is the correct word to use, but I'll take on any right winger any time to talk through these issues. The people who think that this is a fantastic slam dunk on a 16-year-old and she got what she deserved, I'll talk with you about this anytime you like. Come on the show. Come and talk about it, because your reasoning is paper thin and can have holes punched into it so simply. It's like, I really do believe that most of the time, when you're talking to the kinds of people who would write a comment on a Facebook post or a YouTube post that actually is like, degrading of a 16-year-old, you've got no argument left. It's a little bit, I'm being a bit general, but it's a little bit like as soon as you play the person, not the ball, or play the man, not the ball, whatever the saying is, you've proven that you don't have the intelligence or acuity to actually argue the case. Because I agree with Mia. I go into conversations with an idea that you can possibly change my mind. Like, you possibly could. Like, I always, and I've said this, Chewy, I'm always like in this idea of if we're going to enter into a conversation, we have differing opinions. If you're not prepared to change your position, then what you're looking for is an argument.
Yeah.
And I'm not really looking for an argument. So if you're not prepared to change your position, then there's no point engaging. If you are prepared to change your position, and I'm not actually saying you would, or I'm not saying I would, but if you're having an honest dialogue, then fuck, I'll talk to anyone, man.
Oh, and those two things can happen in the same headspace. Like I fucking love an argument, especially when the stakes are low, and also
hence the numerous
stakes
Twitter
are...
accounts, a new Twitter account every 6 days. That's why.
What do you mean you like beans? You know, birds aren't real. That sort of stuff. I love ridiculous arguments. You know, I used to have a party game called Do You Know What Really Grinds My Gears? And it was the whole idea that you had to say, you know what really grinds my gears, and spin out something incredibly ridiculous for as long as you can and get as angry as possible about it. It's a great game. But yeah, I think the point that you can have a conversation with someone on an opposing point of view, not all points of view, but a lot of them, and go, yeah, look, I disagree with some fundamental aspects of what you're saying, but I can see how you got there. I can understand why you've taken that position. I can see some of the merits, but I disagree in the implementation or the end result or whatever. But then if it's two people just devolve yelling at each other, sure, if you want to scratch that itch, awesome. That's what Facebook's for. I love it. But yeah, nobody's having their mind changed. And you might as well just go, you know what, this is fun while it lasts, and then walk away. But no one here is discussing what these kids are trying to accomplish. And every time it comes up, my mind goes to a particular cartoon I saw. It was supposed to be some great global coming together. And it was just one guy goes, what if we go to all of this effort of changing our economy and improving the environment and changing our climate and doing things in a more sustainable way, and we stop trashing the planet, and all we end up with is a better place to live? What a waste. You know, it's just like, well, you know, who cares if climate change is real at all, or if it's man-made or it's not. You know, it does not matter. The way that we're doing things at the moment is shitty, has terrible outcomes, and a lot of negatives. So why don't we maybe listen to the kids for a little bit and go, fuck, these guys are real angry that we've ruined the planet. And we seem to be just going, well, I'll be dead by the time it's a problem. So good luck, kids. Also, you should be at school learning about maths rather than protesting.
Yeah, one of the things of that Sky News, story that was talking about it, and they were talking about what was the phrase? I'm paraphrasing, but they were talking about how, you know, these kids shouldn't be involved in politics, and I'm like, this isn't. If you think that how we deal with our environment is a political issue over an environmental issue, then I think you've shown the gap in this conversation. You know what I'm saying? It's like these kids are going, you fucked up this planet. I want a planet not just for me, but for my kids and my grandkids. And if you fucked it, it's that what is that? Something will get out of the way. There's that old saying.
Lead, follow, get out of the way.
Yeah, and like these young people are saying, so get the fuck out of the way. Now, they might be 100% right. They might be slightly right. They might have some right points, but they're still trying to figure it out. And I'll say again about these people, and I've just actually brought up the back end to our DOC page, and I'm going to bring it up. I'll bring up the back end to show you something. These are like these comments are going crazy on this one about Heather du Plessis-Allan. And we're talking about the idea of what people are complaining about, and no one's getting it. And so when no one gets it, I'm like, well, you guys are actually showing that you can't engage in a conversation. Because remember what we said. Look, this person says this, they're allowed to point out hypocrisy. This person says parents should be ashamed for raising a hypocrite. This person says pointing out hypocrisy. Like, so we're getting criticism, and I don't give a fuck about it, because people are saying, well, they're allowed to point it out. You're you're either not smart enough to see the nuance of the conversation, or you're purposefully missing the conversation, which is no one has said you can't point out the apparent hypocrisy between don't fly to Fiji and you're flying to Fiji, right? No one has said that. What we've said is how it's done is actually whether it becomes bullying or not. No one has said that adults can't point out to kids when maybe they think they've got the wrong end of the stick. But what we are saying is we don't believe in any means to an ends. What we are saying is we don't believe that you can do it however you like. Like in the old days, if it was a face-to-face interaction, that kid would have got whacked around the ears for saying that. We don't do that anymore. Why are we allowed to then belittle them and demean them in front of so many people in an obviously fake way after a grown-ass woman who was a journalist and a broadcaster has done research on the 16-year-olds to set her up to embarrass her and demean her? People just cannot, if you can't see the hypocrisy of hypocrisy is the wrong word. If you can't see that you are allowed to point out the issue you see, but if you do it in a way that's bullying, then it's bullying. Even if your point is correct, you can still bully. And so people on the comments, go for it. We're getting great views. Good for us. But it's what is referred to in the religious world as a clanging cymbal. In other words, someone's just basically going, dong, that's my opinion, because they're not actually engaging in what the conversation is, which is the style of the way it was handled, the interview was handled.
There's so much of that on Facebook. I'm allowed to have an opinion. I'm allowed to say what I think. Yeah, absolutely. Nobody's saying that you can't.
Yeah.
But also what you're wanting to do is say whatever comes into your brain with absolutely no pushback. You don't want to be challenged. You don't want to have someone go, hey, you know what? That was a shitty comment and you probably shouldn't have made it. And I don't know if I want to put this up, actually. It's pretty mild, but we had it in the chat while Mia's interview was playing. Oh, she's so cute. Demeaning. Absolutely irrelevant to what she was saying. You could have just thought it, didn't need to put it out there. Just saying, do better. She said it best. Do better.
Yeah. And people think that's patronizing, but I think we can all do better.
Mm.
You know, like
that's what these kids are asking, basically. If you distill it all down, let's do better than we are now. Because I think there's not many people out there that would say, yeah, there's no changes here. No changes needed.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Hey, well, listen, team BHN, it's been a fantastic 7 months. It's been busy as a freaking busy thing. I have been on this show either in the evenings or when we started, it was during the day, every weekday bar one for the last 7 months. And I'm taking a week off. And the reason I'm taking a week off is because I'm just coming off the back of I think I've broadcast for 33 out of 35 of the last days because I've been doing weekend stuff with mayoralty candidates as well. There's no mayoralty candidate conversation tomorrow if people are wondering. Chewy, you can testify to the reason that I'm not doing that. I haven't given out any details as to why that's not happening other than
That's a good call.
There was a candidate who if you were from a Dunedin thing, there was a candidate I was supposed to speak to tomorrow who gave me some personal information that as an interviewer would be important for me to share. And then they said they didn't want it shared. And I was stuck in a quandary where I couldn't not speak to this person without sharing this information because it was pertinent to the mayoralty. And I didn't want to put them in a position where sharing that personal information may impact their personal life. So I felt only ethical thing I could do, and Chewy, you'll still the email, you can speak to this, was to actually cancel the conversation. It is actually a candidate who has about a 0.03% chance of winning. So I don't think it's going to add or take away from the debate. So there is no conversation tomorrow. So my holiday starts basically when I stop the stream, and then I'm back again on 2 Mondays, off to Auckland next week. Got some meetings set up and stuff. And remember, just one more time for people, that Patreon goes out on the 1st of every month, which means you've got 21 minutes if you want to come and be a part of our Patreon, help us to continue to make independent news. And for those people who are in there already, thanks very much. There are rewards and benefits and stuff that are all the way through this for people doing various things, including caps and t-shirts and meetings and all sorts of stuff in there as well. So patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And remember, I'll just promise when I get to Auckland, I'll just put it all on black, every single cent, and we'll see how we go. That's my promise to you. All right, dude. Anything else you want to lift or say to the punters before anything else?
Shall we vote in your local body elections, because there's a lot of lunatics out there.
Yep.
Listen to She Hard, especially the last 2 albums, because they're great. They're on tour at the moment as well. And if you like craft beer, go and look for New. They're a Dunedin-based brewery that are unfortunately closing because their owner got bored. But they're very good.
They've always had some really interesting flavors as well. They're always kind of on the edge of trying crazy new stuff.
Yeah, they kind of lost that towards the end because the guy that was doing that moved on. But yeah, the one that I always bring out is that they had a smoked eel stout.
Yeah,
it's not my jam, but I'm glad it exists because it's the one that always gets brought up. But I went to like their second to last night, and I bought this T-shirt, which is of a weirdly sexual beer bottle, and I'm happy with that.
Cool. Everyone's saying nice things. I appreciate that. The nicest thing you can do is #share our shit, and to check us out next week. Enjoy some of the content that's going to be up. Chewy and George will decide whether they want to jump in. If not, there'll be interesting conversation stuff happening through the whole week. And to catch you guys back here again, I think it's about the 10th. About the 10th is the Monday. And we'll give you all sorts of updates there as to if anything interesting's happened in this time off. Wink, nudge, nudge, say no more. And other than that, I think we're done. We done, Chewy?
Nice one, bruv.
Are we done,
I
Nala?
said nice one.
Are we done? Hey, she's out, man. Oi, talking to you.
Dead. Oh no, there we go. It's alive.
Are we done? Is it time for bed? Do you want to go to bed?
No, it's
Nala. Oh, you just stay there? All right, she'll just stay there. Oh, she got a wash today, so she's extra fluffy at the moment. And yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all the kind words. I appreciate you. I appreciate your thoughts, as does Chewy. We'll all have a bit of a break and hopefully come back nice and refreshed on the 10th to see you again in another episode of Big Hairy News. All right, team. Hooroo. Goodbye. So long. Farewell. Auf Wiedersehen.